Have you ever walked into a store planning to buy one thing and walked out with three? Maybe you told yourself they were all good deals, or maybe you just didn't want to miss out. That little tug in your mind, the one that whispers, buy it now, that's not random. It's a bias. A hidden mental shortcut that quietly shapes what you do, what you feel, and what you believe. We all like to think of ourselves as rational, that we make decisions based on logic, reason, and facts. But the truth is, our brains are wired for efficiency, not perfection. They take mental shortcuts every second, simplifying a complex world. Most of the time, that's helpful. But sometimes, those shortcuts lead us straight into traps. Psychologists call them cognitive biases. They're like invisible hands, nudging your choices without asking permission. And the strange part? You rarely notice them. Let's start with a simple experiment. In 1974, two psychologists, Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman, asked people to spin a wheel rigged to land on either 10 or 65. Then they asked each person to estimate the percentage of African nations in the United Nations. The people who saw 10 guessed around 25%. Those who saw 65 guessed around 45%. The number on the wheel had nothing to do with the question, but it anchored their thinking. That's the anchoring bias. When a random number sets the tone for how we judge everything after, you see it every day. When a store shows a was $299, now $149 sign, even if $149 is still overpriced, it suddenly feels like a deal. Our brains compare instead of calculate. Another bias that hijacks our decisions is confirmation bias. It's the reason arguments online never seem to end. We naturally seek out evidence that supports what we already believe and ignore what doesn't. In a 2021 study from the University of Amsterdam, researchers found that people were 37% more likely to click on articles that agreed with their opinions than ones that challenged them. That's not just about politics or social media. It's about everything, from how we choose friends to how we judge our own habits. Think about it. If you believe you're bad at math, you'll notice every mistake you make and dismiss every success as luck. If you believe you're good with people, you'll remember every compliment and forget every awkward silence. Your brain filters reality to protect your identity. Then there's the availability bias. Our minds assume that if something comes easily to mind, it must be common or likely. If you've seen 3 news stories about plane crashes this month, flying might suddenly feel dangerous, despite statistics showing it's far safer than driving. In the US, your lifetime odds of dying in a car crash are about 1 in 93. For air travel, it's closer to 1 in 11 million. But your mind doesn't calculate odds. It recalls images, emotionally charged ones. The vivid beats the accurate. Now, let's talk about loss aversion. This one runs deep. In behavioral economics, it's the idea that losing something hurts about twice as much as gaining something feels good. Imagine finding $100 on the street. You'd feel great. But if you lost $100 tomorrow, the sting would be much stronger. That's why investors panic sell during downturns, even when patience would pay off. And it's why people cling to old habits that don't serve them, because change feels like loss. Here's a simple example. In one experiment, people were given a coffee mug and later offered the chance to trade it for a chocolate bar of equal value. Half of them refused. But when the experiment was reversed, starting with the chocolate bar, half refused to give that up too. Same value, different perspective. Once we own something, our brains inflate its worth. That's called the endowment effect, and it's a cousin of loss aversion. There's also the halo effect, one of the most deceptive biases of all. It makes us assume that if someone excels in one area, they must be good in others. Like assuming a good-looking person is also trustworthy, or that a confident speaker must be competent. In hiring, this bias can be costly. Studies show that attractive candidates are rated as more intelligent and capable, even when their resumes are identical to others. That's not just unfair, it's inefficient. And speaking of unfairness, let's touch on the fundamental attribution error. It's a fancy term for a simple habit. When someone else messes up, we blame their character. When we mess up, we blame the situation. If a coworker misses a deadline, we think they're lazy. If we miss it, we tell ourselves we were overloaded. In a 2019 cross-cultural study, researchers found that this bias appears in nearly every society studied, though it's weaker in collectivist cultures like Japan and stronger in individualist ones like the US. That means culture shapes how much we judge others versus ourselves. Then there's the sunk cost fallacy, the mental trap of sticking with something just because you've already invested in it. We do it with projects, relationships, even TV shows. You think, I've already spent so much time on this, I can't quit now. But logically, past effort shouldn't matter. You should only consider the future payoff. Yet, our brains hate waste. So we keep investing, hoping to justify what's already gone. In business, this bias costs billions. A Harvard study found that companies continuing with underperforming projects due to sunk costs wasted an average of 18% of their annual R&D budgets. That's not poor strategy, it's human psychology at work. Now maybe you're thinking, okay, I get it, my brain's full of glitches, so what can I do about it? Good question. Because awareness alone isn't enough. Even experts who study these biases fall for them. But there are ways to outsmart them, or at least slow them down. The first step is to pause. Biases thrive on speed. They sneak in when you're rushing or multitasking. If you simply take a few seconds to ask, why am I making this choice? You give your rational brain a fighting chance. Researchers at Princeton found that when participants delayed decisions by just 50 milliseconds, accuracy improved significantly because the brain had time to engage its deliberate system instead of its automatic one. Second, seek disconfirming evidence. It's uncomfortable, but powerful. When you catch yourself believing something strongly, look for reasons it might be wrong. That's not self-doubt, it's mental hygiene. In one study, people trained to actively question their assumptions reduced confirmation bias by nearly 30% over 6 weeks. That's a measurable shift in how their brains processed information. Third, diversify your perspective. Talk to people who think differently. Read sources outside your usual bubble, because biases feed on sameness. When everyone around you sees the world the same way, your blind spots grow deeper. But when you expose yourself to diverse viewpoints, your brain learns to flex, to tolerate nuance. That's how wisdom grows. There's another trick, reframing. Instead of asking, what do I stand to gain? Ask, what do I stand to lose if I'm wrong? Loss aversion works both ways. By flipping the frame, you can use bias against itself. For instance, imagine you're debating whether to switch careers. Your mind focuses on what you might lose: stability, comfort, the known. But if you reframe the question, what might I lose if I stay where I am? Suddenly the risk looks different. That's how reframing turns fear into clarity. Now, here's something subtle but important. Not all biases are bad. Without them, we'd be paralyzed by indecision. Imagine having to rationally analyze every choice, every meal, every route, every word. You'd never move. Biases are mental shortcuts that evolved to keep us alive. The problem isn't that we have them, it's that we let them drive without supervision. Take the optimism bias, for example. Most people overestimate the likelihood of positive outcomes. We believe we'll live longer than average, earn more than average, and stay healthier than average. Statistically, that's impossible for everyone. But optimism fuels motivation. It pushes us to take chances, start businesses, fall in love, raise families. So some biases are like fire, dangerous if uncontrolled, but essential for progress. Let's go deeper into how these biases form. Our brains evolved in environments very different from the world we live in today. Back then, quick decisions meant survival. If you hesitated to run from a rustle in the bushes, you might become lunch. So the brain built shortcuts, patterns of thinking that favored speed over accuracy. Those shortcuts became hardwired heuristics. Today, they still operate under the surface, even though the threats are no longer predators but PowerPoints. Neuroscientists have traced some of these biases to specific brain regions. The amygdala, for example, plays a key role in loss aversion and fear-based decisions. The prefrontal cortex, which handles reasoning and planning, tries to regulate it, but only if given the time. MRI studies show that when people make snap judgments, the amygdala lights up first. When they pause and reflect, the prefrontal cortex takes over. So every time you slow down your decision-making, you're literally shifting control from your emotional brain to your rational one. Another powerful insight comes from group psychology. Biases don't just operate individually, they spread socially. In groups, we often mirror each other's judgments to fit in. That's the conformity bias. You've probably felt it in meetings when everyone nods at a bad idea just because the boss seems enthusiastic. In 1951, Solomon Asch demonstrated this with his famous line experiment. Participants were asked to match line lengths. When Confederates purposely gave wrong answers, 75% of participants conformed at least once. They doubted their own eyes to stay aligned with the group. Today, social media amplifies that bias 1,000-fold. Algorithms feed you content similar to what you already engage with, reinforcing your worldview. That's digital confirmation bias in action. And when you see thousands of people liking or sharing the same post, it triggers social proof, the belief that if many approve, it must be true. But volume doesn't equal validity. It just feels that way. We also face hindsight bias, the feeling that we knew it all along. After something happens, our brains rewrite memory to make the outcome seem predictable. It's comforting, but misleading. In one study, participants asked to recall their predictions about election outcomes distorted their memories by an average of 20% to match the real result. It's a quiet illusion of wisdom. So what's the antidote? Humility. Recognizing that we don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are. That insight alone can transform how we handle disagreements, make investments, or even choose partners. Let's explore a practical scenario. Imagine two friends, Maya and Jordan. They both apply for the same job. Maya gets rejected and thinks, the interviewer was biased against me. Jordan doesn't get the job either, but says, maybe I need to improve my resume. Same outcome, different interpretations. Maya's response might be shaped by self-serving bias, protecting her ego by blaming external factors. Jordan's might reflect a growth mindset, which research shows leads to better long-term outcomes. In 2018, Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck's team found that students trained to see failure as feedback improved their grades by 23% over a semester. That's the power of reframing bias into learning. Another everyday example. Imagine you're shopping online and see that one product has 3,000 reviews and another has 50. You instantly trust the popular one more. That's herd behavior. It feels safe to follow the crowd. But studies from MIT's Media Lab show that early positive feedback can snowball popularity regardless of actual quality. Meaning the crowd isn't always wise, it's just loud. So how can you train your mind to resist these pulls? Start by labeling them. When you notice yourself making a snap judgment, say to yourself, that's anchoring, or that's social proof. Naming a bias activates awareness. And awareness is like sunlight. It weakens whatever hides. You can also use mental checklists. Ask, what evidence would change my mind? Am I valuing something just because I own it? Am I choosing speed over accuracy? These small questions interrupt big biases. And remember, emotions aren't the enemy. They're data. They tell you what matters. But they shouldn't be the decision maker. When emotion leads, logic follows. When logic leads, emotion supports. That's balance. Consider how pilots train. They use checklists, not because they forget, but because they know how easily human judgment can drift under pressure. They externalize the decision process to reduce bias. You can do the same in daily life. Write down your reasons before making big choices. Revisit them later to see if they still hold. That's how you replace impulse with insight. And here's a surprising twist. Your physical state affects bias too. In a 2020 study, hungry participants made significantly riskier financial decisions than those who'd just eaten. Low blood sugar reduced impulse control. Even time of day matters. Judges in one study were more lenient after lunch than before it. So sometimes, outsmarting bias starts with something as simple as a snack or a nap. Now let's zoom out. Biases shape not only individual choices, but entire societies. They influence policies, markets, even justice systems. For instance, when police officers are shown faces of different ethnicities flashed quickly on screen, implicit bias tests reveal faster threat detection responses to certain groups, even when officers consciously reject prejudice. That doesn't mean they're bad people. It means bias is automatic. Recognizing it is the first step toward fairness. Technology companies are grappling with this too. AI systems trained on human data inherit human biases. If past hiring data favored men, algorithms may unconsciously do the same. That's why ethical design now includes bias audits, using diverse data to retrain models. Because in the modern world, our cognitive biases are being scaled by machines. At this point, you might be wondering, can we ever truly be unbiased? Probably not, but we can be bias aware. We can create systems, habits, and cultures that catch our blind spots before they catch us. Think of bias like gravity. You can't escape it, but you can learn how it pulls and build structures that stand strong despite it. So next time you're about to make a decision, big or small, pause. Ask yourself, what's influencing me right now? Is it fear of loss? The comfort of consensus? The illusion of fairness? You won't always catch it. But even noticing once in a while makes your thinking sharper, your empathy deeper, and your life more deliberate. And if you want to keep exploring how the mind really works, subscribe to Tortoise Brain, because understanding your brain is the first step to mastering it. Let's end with a simple reflection. Imagine your mind as a courtroom. Each bias is a persuasive lawyer. Anchoring argues first, confirmation shouts loudest, loss aversion pleads with emotion. Logic is the quiet judge, trying to stay neutral. The goal isn't to silence the lawyers, it's to make sure the judge gets the final word. That's how you outsmart your hidden biases, not by pretending they don't exist, but by inviting them into the light. By questioning the first thought, not suppressing it. By remembering that clarity isn't born from certainty, it's born from curiosity. And the more curious you become about your own mind, the freer your decisions will be. Because awareness, not perfection, is the real sign of intelligence.